It was supposed to be a hearing to figure out what went wrong the day of that massive attack on the United States consulate in Benghazi, but it quickly became a political food fight. The House Oversight Committee, controlled by Republicans, grilled State Department officials about that September 11th assault. 4 Americans, including the United States ambassador, died. Republican lawmakers charged the facility was simply not adequately protected, and they criticized the Obama administration for initially blaming the attacks on protests against an anti-Muslim film rather than terror.
Why in the world did you say it was anything at all when you put Jay Carney out there and Ambassador Rice to say that this is a result of an inflammatory reaction to a controversial film? Sir, it begs the question, what happened? Was it as a result of political pressure trumping professional protocol? Was it not?
Mr. Ross, I have been a career Foreign Service officer for 39 years. I have served every president since Richard Nixon. And I have directly served 6 secretaries of state, Democratic and Republican. On my honor, none political pressure was applied to me in this case by anyone in the State Department, at the National Security Council, or at the White House.
Then it was a professional protocol malpractice.
All right, let's bring in our foreign affairs reporter, Elise Levitt. You were monitoring, Elise, that entire hearing today. Was there a good explanation from the State Department why the United States ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice, 5 days after this, kept insisting that it was the result of the film as opposed to a carefully plotted terror attack?
I wouldn't say that there was a plausible explanation, guys. What the State Department, what the whole administration keeps maintaining is this is the best information that they had at the time. But you'll notice nobody from the State Department ever said that. I mean, you remember the day after the attack, officials were telling me and Joe Doherty that this was not some kind of protest. This was a planned military-style assault. And the night before, last night, we were talking with senior State Department officials, and they said, look, that wasn't our conclusion. So I think that there's a little bit of, butt covering going on. But I certainly don't think that the State Department ever maintained it was a protest. And you'll notice Secretary of State Clinton never said that either.
This was one of the more fiery hearings that I've watched in a while.
Very much so.
And I've watched a lot of them, and it went on for hours, really. Did it break any new ground? Do we hear anything new today?
Well, unfortunately, I think all this kind of political grandstanding on both sides now really detracted from the fact that there were some interesting things that came out. The security officer, Eric Nordstrom, said that he repeatedly sent letters to the State Department. Those cables have been released by the committee, that he asked for additional help. He asked for additional manpower, and it was denied. And he kept trying to say, listen, we felt pressured. We felt like every time we asked for more help, we were criticized because the State Department had less resources. And because the State Department the committee was jumping on the witnesses, didn't really have time to kind of fully answer the question, and I think it was really unfortunate.
In all your years of covering these hearings, and you cover the State Department, foreign affairs for us, have you seen an acrimonious hearing like this?
I mean, they were really dressing him down at one point.
We were talking about this earlier. I mean, I've been covering the State Department for 12 years, budget hearings, all of these kind of hearings. I haven't seen anything like that. And I mean, this is the committee's job for oversight and investigation, but I think that it did itself a disservice because it didn't allow the investigation to come out. There is going to be a couple of other investigations, the FBI investigation and an independent review board. So hopefully we'll get more of these answers, because certainly the State Department does have a lot of accounting to do.
Important question still, and not surprisingly, both Democrats and Republicans today accusing the other side of playing politics.
The Democrats were saying about, that the Republicans cut budget. We didn't get a chance to talk about that.
Stand by for a moment. Arwa Damon has covered the story like no one else. She was at the American consulate in Benghazi in the days immediately following the attack. Arwa, first of all, what you saw personally compared to what you're hearing now, how does it compare?
Well, it seems as if the information that's coming out right now is really beginning to streamline along with the narratives that we were hearing when we were on the ground in Benghazi just 3 days after the attack took place. If you will remember, one of the Libyan security guards, they are unarmed, they only have radios, but they form the first line of defense, had told us that he believed that the attack had been pre-planned, that there was no demonstration that had taken place, describing a situation where he could hear people's voices chanting, becoming increasingly louder from 3 different directions before he says the attack began immediately, incredibly intense. He says that the compound's outer perimeter was very easily breached. This has been one of the main central issues. How is it that the U.S. initially was claiming that this was a demonstration turned violent when on the ground we were hearing different narratives of what did take place, bearing in mind that, yes, initially there was a lot of conflicting information. It most certainly is always incredibly challenging to figure out exactly what took place in Libya. But it's also important to note, I think, that the U.S. did not have anyone on the ground in the days following the attack after they evacuated all of their personnel, making on-the-ground information gathering incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for them when it came to the site of the U.S. consulate itself in Benghazi. In fact, it wasn't until 3 weeks later that the FBI did show up on site, Wolf.
There are critically important lessons that have to be learned about this disaster to make sure it doesn't happen again. Arwa, thanks very much for that, Elise. Thanks to you as well.
Thank you, Elise.